Joseph Rice slammed his fist on the table, seething with anger at the Galactic Council's bullshit decree banning humans from fighting in wars across the galaxy, while the cowardly council sat back and let other species slaughter each other. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Humans, with their unmatched combat skills and razor-sharp strategic minds, were barred from settling scores on the battlefield. Yet the Council happily allowed the Zorgons, Thaxians, and other hostile races to wage bloody wars that ravaged worlds. Rice had dedicated his life to the Space Marine Corps, training relentlessly to defend Earth and humanity's colonies. Being forced to sit on the sidelines while the galaxy burned was unbearable. The grizzled veteran knew there had to be more to this band than met the eye. He started digging, chasing whispers about the sins of mankind's past, a long-buried secret from an ancient interstellar war. Starving for the truth, Rice went rogue, ready to sacrifice everything to unearth what really happened all those centuries ago. His hunt for answers led him straight into the crosshairs of Theros, a hardened Eliani warrior who despised humans with every fiber of his being. Rice could tell from Theros' murderous glare that the alien held the missing pieces of the puzzle. But the Eliani soldier would rather gouge out his own eyes than help a lowly human. Just as tensions between them neared a breaking point, urgent news broke across the galaxy. The Zorgons had returned from the grave to conquer every sentient race. Chaos and destruction spread like wildfire from system to system. In a moment of sheer desperation, the Galactic Council turned to the unlikely duo of Rice and Theros. Only they had the skills and experience to pull off a secret mission and stop the Zorgons. The fate of trillions hung by a thread. With the future of all civilization on the line, Joseph and Theros had to bury the hatchet, setting off together on a deadly quest into the heart of darkness. Failure meant a fate worse than death. The journey to Xandar was a baptism by fire for Joseph and Theros. As soon as their ship touched down on the war-ravaged planet, they found themselves dodging artillery shells and plasma bolts. Rival factions fought tooth and nail for every scrap of territory, turning the once thriving world into a nightmarish hellscape. Joseph gripped his pulse rifle tight as he and Theros sprinted across a bomb-cratered battlefield. Explosions shook the earth, kicking up clouds of dirt and debris. The human marine's combat instincts kicked into high gear, his senses sharpened to a razor's edge. Theros moved with the deadly grace of a predator, his movements fluid and precise. The Eleni warrior's eyes darted back and forth, scanning for threats. Joseph had to admit, the alien soldier was damn good at what he did. As they pushed deeper into enemy territory, Joseph and Theros encountered a group of Xandarian rebels holed up in the ruins of a bombed-out building. The rebels trained their weapons on the approaching duo, suspicion etched on their battle-weary faces. "Hold your fire!" a gruff voice barked. A massive Xandarian with a cybernetic arm stepped forward, his one good eye narrowing as he sized up Joseph and Theros. "I'm Rax. Who the hell are you two?" Joseph lowered his rifle slightly, meeting Rax's gaze. "Joseph Rice, Space Marine Corps. This is Theros. We're here to stop the Zorgons." Rax let out a harsh laugh. "You and every other poor bastard on this rock. What makes you think you can succeed where we've failed?" Theros stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "We have information that could turn the tide of this war, but we need your help to find it." Rax considered their words for a moment, then nodded. "Fine, but if you want our help, you're going to have to prove yourselves first. We've got a job that needs doing." And so Joseph and Theros found themselves fighting alongside Rax and his rebels, blasting their way through enemy lines and gathering intel on the Zorgons' movements. As they battled side by side, Joseph started to see Theros in a new light. The Eliani was a fierce warrior, but he also had a code of honor that Joseph could respect. Their search led them to an ancient Xandarian temple hidden deep in the jungle. As they stepped inside, Joseph felt a chill run down his spine. The temple was filled with strange artifacts and ancient texts, all hinting at a long-forgotten power. "This is it," Theros said, his voice hushed with reverence. "The key to defeating the Zorgons." But before they could explore further, A blast of energy slammed into the temple wall. Joseph spun around to see a group of Zorgan scouts pouring into the chamber, weapons blazing. "Ambush!" Rax yelled, diving for cover. Joseph and Theros reacted instantly, their training taking over. They moved as one, ducking and weaving through the hail of laser fire. Joseph took down 2 scouts with precise shots from his pulse rifle, while Theros closed in with his razor-sharp blades, cutting down the rest in a whirlwind of steel. As the last scout fell, Joseph turned to Theros, a grin spreading across his face. "Not bad for an Eliani." Theros gave a grudging nod. "You fight well for a human." But their moment of camaraderie was short-lived. A dying scout gasped out a final warning. The Zorgans were coming, and they would stop at nothing to destroy the temple and the secrets it held. Joseph, Theros, and Rax knew they had to act fast. They pored over the ancient texts, searching for any clue that could lead them to the weapon they needed. As they worked, Joseph couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Finally, they found what they were looking for. A hidden chamber, deep within the temple, housing a device that could neutralize the Zorgan's technology. But before they could claim their prize, the ground shook with the impact of a massive explosion. "They're here," Rax growled, checking his weapon. "We need to buy some time." Joseph nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "We'll use the temple as bait, lure them in close, then we'll spring the trap." Theros hefted his blades, a fierce light burning in his eyes. "Let's send these bastards back to the void." As the Zorgon army descended on the temple, Joseph, Theros, and the Xandarian rebels prepared for the fight of their lives. They set up defensive positions, rigged traps and explosives, and steeled themselves for the coming storm. The battle was brutal and bloody, a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. Joseph and Theros fought like men possessed, their skills and fury driving the Zorgans back again and again. But for every enemy they cut down, 2 more seemed to take their place. In the chaos of battle, Joseph found himself shoulder to shoulder with Theros, the 2 warriors moving in perfect sync. Jagged bits and flashes of understanding passed between them, taking the place of words. Joseph saw his own drive mirrored in Theros' eyes, 2 unlikely allies united by a common cause. As the fighting raged on, Joseph and Theros pushed deeper into the Zorgon ranks, cutting a path towards the heart of the enemy force. They knew that somewhere in the midst of the battle, the key to activating the ancient weapon lay waiting. Suddenly, a massive Zorgan commander loomed before them, his armor crackling with dark energy. The alien warrior fixed them with a cruel, knowing smile. "You seek the Xandarian weapon," the commander hissed. "The one thing that could threaten our conquest. Fools! We have searched for it for centuries, and now you have led us right to it." With a roar of challenge, the commander charged forward, his blades swinging in a deadly arc. Joseph barely managed to bring his rifle up in time to block the blow, the force of the impact sending shockwaves up his arms. Beside him, Theros let out a battle cry and leapt to meet the commander head-on. The Eliani's blades flashed in a dizzying flurry of strikes, clashing against the Zorgon's crackling energy shield. Joseph added his firepower to the mix, peppering the commander with pulse rounds. But the Zorgon's armor seemed to absorb the shots, leaving him unscathed. As the fight dragged on, Joseph could feel his strength starting to flag. The commander was an opponent unlike any he had ever faced before, a relentless juggernaut of destruction. But he couldn't give up. Not now, not when they were so close. Joseph dug deep, drawing on reserves of willpower he didn't know he had. Beside him, Theros fought with the fury of a cornered beast, his blade seeking any gap in the commander's defenses. In a last, risky move, Joseph spotted an opening. He lunged forward, ramming his rifle barrel into the commander's faceplate. The Zorgon reeled back, his energy shield flickering. "Theros now!" Joseph yelled. The Eliani needed no further prompting. With a roar of triumph, Theros buried his blades deep in the commander's chest, piercing the alien's heart. As the commander fell, Joseph and Theros stood panting, their armor scorched and dented. Around them, the battle still raged, but they had bought themselves a precious moment of respite. Joseph reached out and clasped Theros' shoulder. "We make a good team," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. Theros gave a short, sharp nod. "Indeed. But the fight is not over yet. We must find the key and activate the weapon before it is too late." Together, the human and the Ileani plunged back into the fray, their newfound trust and respect forged in the crucible of battle. The fate of humanity and all alien species hung in the balance, and failure was not an option. Joseph pounded his fist onto the ancient Xandarian device, activating it with a satisfying click. A low hum filled the air, growing in intensity until it burst forth in a blinding pulse of energy. The waves swept across the battlefield, washing over friend and foe alike. In an instant, the cacophony of battle fell silent. Zorgon weapons sputtered and died, their energy cores rendered inert by the pulse. The aliens stood dumbfounded, staring at their useless technology. "Now!" Rax bellowed, his voice carrying across the sudden stillness. The Xandarian rebels surged forward, their own weapons still functioning. Joseph and Theros joined the charge, cutting down confused Zorgons left and right. The tide turned swiftly, the once unstoppable alien force now in full retreat. As the last Zorgon fled, Joseph sank to his knees, chest heaving. Theros stood nearby, alien blood dripping from his blades. "We did it," Joseph panted, a grin spreading across his face. Theros nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Perhaps you humans are not entirely useless after all." Before Joseph could retort, the air before them shimmered. A figure materialized, a hologram of a human male in an old military uniform. Joseph's eyes widened in recognition. "General Ezra Novak," he breathed, "but you've been dead for centuries." The hologram spoke, its voice echoing with age. "Joseph Rice, I've been watching you. There's something you need to know." Novak's hologram told a tale that shook Joseph to his core. Humans possessing a unique genetic trait. The Nexus, an artifact of immense power. Atrocities committed in the heat of war. The Galactic Council's ban on human involvement in galactic conflicts. It wasn't just about protecting other species from us, Joseph realized aloud. It was about protecting us from ourselves. Theros listened intently, his alien features unreadable. Novak's hologram nodded gravely. "The Nexus is both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. I've hidden it away, but now the time has come for it to be found again." The general rattled off a string of coordinates, which Joseph hurriedly committed to memory. "Use it wisely, Joseph," Novak warned. "The fate of the stars may well rest in your hands." With those ominous words, the hologram flickered and vanished. Joseph and Theros stood in stunned silence, the weight of their new mission settling heavily upon them. Rax approached, clapping Joseph on the shoulder. "Whatever happens next, you've got our support. The Xandarian rebels stand with you." Joseph nodded his thanks, mind racing. He turned to Theros, seeing his own mix of dedication and apprehension mirrored in the alien's eyes. "You heard the man," Joseph said. "We've got a nexus to find." Theros grunted in agreement. "And Zorgons to destroy." The unlikely pair set off, leaving the battered ruins of Xandar behind. The secrets of the Nexus awaited, along with the power to save all of the galaxy, or tear it apart. Joseph and Theros left Xandar behind. The coordinates from General Novak burned into their minds. Their ship cut through the vast emptiness of space, pushing towards an uncharted sector of the galaxy. Days passed in tense silence. Joseph pored over star charts, cross-checking Novak's data. Theros kept watch, his alien eyes scanning for threats. "We're here," Joseph announced, breaking the quiet. A blue-green orb filled their view screen, wreathed in swirling clouds. As they entered the atmosphere, turbulence rattled their craft. Joseph wrestled with the controls, fighting to keep them level. They broke through the cloud cover, revealing a landscape of dense jungles and towering mountain peaks. "There!" Theros pointed, a clearing barely large enough for their ship. Joseph set them down with a bone-jarring thud. The hatch hissed open, and they stepped out into humid air thick with alien scents. A rustle in the undergrowth. Joseph's hand went to his weapon. Theros tensed, ready to strike. Figures emerged from the jungle. Tall, willowy creatures with iridescent skin. One stepped forward, brandishing a crude spear. "We mean no harm," Joseph said, raising his hands. The alien jabbed its spear towards them, chattering in an unknown tongue. Theros moved with lightning speed, disarming the alien, but instead of attacking, he placed the spear on the ground and stepped back. The aliens froze, then erupted in excited chatter. The leader approached, touching its forehead in what seemed like a gesture of respect. "I think we passed some kind of test," Joseph muttered. The aliens led them through the jungle. Joseph noticed intricate carvings on trees, glyphs that tugged at his memory. They reached a village of woven huts. An elder emerged, his skin wrinkled and pale. He studied Joseph and Theros with ancient eyes. "I am Grokath," he said in halting galactic standard. "You seek the power hidden in our world." Joseph nodded. "We need it to save countless lives." Grokath considered this. "We will guide you, but the journey is perilous." For days they trekked through the wilderness. Joseph and Theros faced challenges that tested their limits. They forded raging rivers, scaled treacherous cliffs, and fought off predators with gnashing teeth and venomous claws. Through it all, their bond grew stronger. Joseph came to rely on Theros' inhuman strength and keen senses. Theros found himself impressed by the human's resourcefulness and unwavering spirit. At last, they stood before a sheer mountain face. Grokath pointed to a narrow crevice. "The temple lies within." They squeezed through the opening, emerging into a vast cavern. Before them stood an immense structure of weathered stone, its surface covered in familiar symbols. "It's like the ruins on Xandar," Joseph breathed. Inside, they faced a gauntlet of traps and puzzles. Pressure plates triggered dart launchers. Ancient mechanisms threatened to crush them. Each challenge required both Joseph's problem-solving and Theros' physical prowess to overcome. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum. A pedestal stood in the center, bathed in an otherworldly glow. Atop it sat a pulsing crystalline object, the Nexus. As they approached, a familiar figure flickered to life. General Novak's hologram regarded them gravely. "The Nexus is power beyond imagining," Novak's voice echoed. "It amplifies not just ability, but the very essence of its wielder. In the wrong hands, it could bring ruin to all." Joseph reached for the artifact, his hand trembling. "We have no choice. The Zorgons—" A thunderous explosion rocked the chamber. Zorgon troops poured in, led by a hulking commander. "The Nexus is ours!" Joseph lunged, grasping the Nexus. Power surged through him, unlike anything he'd ever felt. His senses sharpened to impossible levels. Strength flooded his limbs. With a thought, he sent a wave of force smashing into the Zorgon ranks. Soldiers went flying. The commander staggered back, shock on his alien features. Joseph turned to Theros, grinning wildly, but the expression on his friend's face gave him pause. Theros looked afraid. "Joseph," Theros said carefully, "your eyes." And suddenly, Joseph felt it. The whispers, the urges, crushing his enemies, dominating the galaxy, remaking it in his image. He gritted his teeth, fighting the surging darkness within. The battle raged around him, but the true struggle was inside his own mind. Theros watched helplessly as his friend wrestled with forces beyond comprehension. He had to find a way to help Joseph control the Nexus before it was too late. Joseph's eyes blazed with an otherworldly light as he unleashed the full might of the Nexus. His movements blurred, faster than any human eye could follow. Zorgon soldiers fell before him like wheat before a scythe, their armor crumpling under his enhanced strength. "By the stars," Theros muttered, watching his friend tear through the alien ranks. But as Joseph fought, something changed. His attacks grew wilder, more vicious. He no longer disabled his foes, he crushed them. Theros saw Joseph's face twist into a rictus of rage, his eyes burning with primal fury. "Joseph!" Theros called out, but his friend didn't seem to hear. Theros fought his way through the chaos, parrying blaster bolts and striking down Zorgons left and right. He had to reach the commander. It was their only hope. There, a flash of ornate armor. The Zorgon commander bellowed orders, rallying his troops. Theros charged, his blades singing through the air. The commander whirled, energy axe humming to life. Their weapons clashed in a shower of sparks. Theros ducked under a wild swing, feeling the heat of the axe pass inches from his face. He countered, his blade scraping against the commander's armor. They traded blows, neither gaining the upper hand. Theros' muscles burned with exertion. Then he saw it, a small device on the commander's chest plate, lights blinking rapidly. Theros feinted left, then struck. His blade found its mark, dislodging the device. It clattered to the ground, sparking. A ripple passed through the Zorgon ranks. Weapons sputtered and died. Armor panels locked up, leaving soldiers immobilized. "Joseph!" Theros shouted. "Now's our chance!" But Joseph didn't respond. He continued his rampage, tearing into defenseless Zorgons with terrifying ease. "Joseph, stop!" Theros pleaded. "This isn't you!" For a moment, Joseph paused. His eyes, glowing with Nexus energy, met Theros. Something flickered there. Recognition, confusion. "Remember who you are," Theros said. "Remember why we fight." Joseph blinked. His hands trembled. Then, with a roar of effort, he channeled the Nexus's power. A wave of force swept out, knocking the remaining Zorgons off their feet. The battle was over in moments. Zorgon soldiers fled, carrying their wounded. Joseph stood amid the carnage, chest heaving. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. Theros rushed to his side, cradling his friend's head. "That was too close," Joseph whispered, his voice hoarse. "Indeed," Theros agreed, "but you pulled through, as always." They shared a look of understanding, born from shared battles and mutual respect. As they emerged from the ruined temple, Grokath approached, flanked by his people. The Krozath regarded Joseph and Theros with awe. "We witnessed your battle," Grokath said. "The power you wield, it could change everything." Joseph nodded grimly. "It already has, but this is just the beginning." Theros clasped Joseph's shoulder. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." With the Nexus secured and new allies at their side, they knew the real fight was just beginning. The Zorgons would return, and the truth behind humanity's past still lay hidden. But for now, they had won a crucial victory. And perhaps more importantly, they had not lost themselves in the process. Joseph and Theros trudged through the dense jungle, their bodies aching from the recent battle. The humid air clung to their skin as they made their way back to the Krozath village. Grokath greeted them at the village entrance, his iridescent skin shimmering in the fading light. "You have proven yourselves true warriors," Grokath said, touching his forehead in respect. "Our people offer you sanctuary for as long as you need." Joseph nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Grokath. We have much to discuss." In the days that followed, Joseph and Theros sequestered themselves in a small hut on the outskirts of the village. They sat cross-legged on woven mats, the Nexus pulsing between them. "It's more than just a weapon," Joseph murmured, his eyes fixed on the artifact. "It's alive, in a way." Theros leaned forward, his alien features etched with concentration. "Watch closely," he instructed. As Joseph focused on the Nexus, he felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. The world around him sharpened, colors becoming more vivid, sounds more crisp. He raised his hand, and a nearby pebble lifted into the air. "Incredible," Joseph breathed. Theros nodded. "But dangerous. Your anger, your fear, the Nexus amplifies it all." Over the next weeks, Theros guided Joseph through a series of grueling exercises. They sat for hours in meditation, sweat beading on their brows as they grappled with inner turmoil. They sparred in clearings, Theros pushing Joseph to channel the Nexus's power without losing control. One evening, as they rested by a crackling fire, Theros spoke of his past. "I was a warrior once, like you. I've seen the horrors of war, the price of unchecked power. Joseph stared into the flames. I never wanted this responsibility, he admitted. But now that I have it, I can't turn away. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, forged in shared struggle and mutual respect. The peace was shattered one morning by the sound of thunderous explosions. Joseph and Theros raced from their hut to see the sky filled with Zorgan warships, raining fire upon the jungle. Grokath rallied his warriors, their primitive weapons seeming pitiful against the Zorgon onslaught. We know these jungles better than any invader, he declared. We will make them pay for every step. Joseph felt the nexus surge within him, but this time he controlled the flow of power. Theros, we need to take out their command ship. It's the only way. They gathered a small team of Krozath warriors, using the dense foliage as cover as they made their way to the Zorgon landing zone. Joseph used the nexus to cloak their approach, rendering them invisible to Zorgon sensors. Boarding the massive command ship, they fought their way through waves of Zorgon soldiers. Joseph deflected energy blasts with bursts of nexus power, while Theros' blades danced in lethal arcs. On the bridge, they faced the Zorgon commander, the same hulking figure they'd encountered in the temple. The commander sneered, activating an energy shield. You cannot hope to defeat the might of the Zorgon Empire. The battle that followed was fierce. Joseph and Theros moved in perfect sync, combining Nexus-enhanced abilities with honed combat skills. Slowly, inexorably, they wore down the commander's defenses. With a final, devastating strike, Joseph sent the commander crashing to the ground. He stood over the fallen Zorgon, the Nexus pulsing in his hand. Tell me the truth, Joseph demanded. Why were humans really banned from galactic warfare? The commander's eyes widened in fear. Your kind, the power you wielded, entire worlds burned, civilizations erased. The Galactic Council had no choice. Joseph staggered back, the weight of this revelation crushing down on him. He looked at his hands, seeing them anew, instruments of both salvation and destruction. We can be better, Joseph said, more to himself than anyone else. We have to be. With the command ship disabled, the Zorgon fleet fell into disarray. Joseph, Theros, and the Krozath warriors pressed their advantage, driving the invaders from the planet. As the last Zorgon ship disappeared into the atmosphere, Joseph turned to Theros. This isn't over, he said grimly. Theros nodded, his alien eyes filled with understanding. No, my friend. I fear it's only beginning. Joseph's eyes blazed with Nexus energy as he surveyed the Krozath warriors gathered around him. The jungle clearing buzzed with tension and anticipation. The Zorgons threaten everything we hold dear, Joseph spoke, his voice carrying across the assembled fighters. We strike at their heart. Theros nodded, his alien features set in unshakable focus. Our scouts have located a massive shipyard on the nearby moon of Zar 7. The Zorgons are building a planet killer there. Grokath, the Krozath leader, hissed. Such a weapon cannot be allowed to exist. Joseph pulled up a holographic display of the shipyard. We hit them hard and fast. I'll lead the main assault here. He pointed to the outer defenses, drawing their fire and keeping them occupied. While I take a small team through this maintenance tunnel, Theros continued, indicating a narrow passage, we'll plant charges on the Dreadnought's reactor core. The plan set, they moved out. Joseph crouched in the shuttle, feeling the familiar surge of the Nexus coursing through him. The craft shuddered as it entered Zar 7's thin atmosphere. Go! Joseph shouted as the bay doors opened. He leapt out, Nexus power propelling him far beyond human limits. Krozath warriors poured out behind him, their primitive weapons gleaming in the harsh light of the shipyard. Alarms blared. Zorgon defenders scrambled to their positions. Energy bolts sizzled through the air. Joseph thrust out his hand. A wave of force smashed into the nearest gun emplacement, crumpling metal and sending Zorgon soldiers flying. He ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding a barrage of return fire. All around him, the battle raged. Krozath warriors clashed with Zorgon troops in vicious close combat, the air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and the screams of the wounded. Joseph spotted a Zorgon heavy weapons team setting up a particle cannon. He focused, channeling the Nexus. With a thought, he lifted the massive weapon off the ground and hurled it into an oncoming squad of Zorgon reinforcements. Meanwhile, Theros led his strike team through the winding maintenance tunnels. They moved silently, dispatching Zorgon patrols with brutal efficiency. "There," Theros whispered, pointing to a massive doorway. "The reactor core." They slipped inside. The chamber thrummed with barely contained energy. Theros pulled out the explosive charges and began placing them at key structural points. A voice rang out, "I've been waiting for you." Theros spun, coming face to face with the scarred Zorgon commander. The alien's cybernetic eye glowed malevolently. "Your crusade ends here," the commander snarled, activating an energy blade. Theros barely had time to draw his own weapon before the commander was upon him. They traded blows, the clash of their blades echoing through the chamber. The Zorgon fought with inhuman strength and speed. Theros felt his arms growing numb from the force of the impacts. He stumbled, his back hitting the reactor housing. The commander raised his blade for a killing blow. Theros rolled at the last second, the energy blade sinking deep into the reactor's outer shell. Alarms blared. The reactor's containment field flickered. "No!" the commander roared. He banged his head into a nearby console. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing the chamber. Outside, Joseph felt the ground shaking beneath his feet. He looked up to see energy readings from the dreadnought spiking dangerously. "Theros," he breathed. Without hesitation, Joseph focused on the Nexus. The world around him blurred. In an instant, he found himself inside the reactor chamber. The sight that greeted him was chaos. Theros lay bloodied on the floor. The Zorgon commander turned, shock evident on his alien features. "How?" the commander began, but Joseph was already moving. He unleashed the full might of the Nexus. Raw power poured from his hands, slamming into the commander and sending him crashing into the far wall. Joseph rushed to Theros' side. "We need to get out of here, now." Theros coughed, blood speckling his lips. "The charges! Set to blow!" Joseph looked around frantically. The reactor was destabilizing. Waves of energy pulsed outward, warping the very air. He pulled Theros close, summoning every ounce of power the Nexus could provide. An iridescent bubble of energy formed around them. The world went white. When Joseph's vision cleared, he found himself lying amid smoking ruins. The dreadnought was gone, replaced by a massive crater. Debris rained down from the sky. Theros stirred beside him. "Did we—" "Yeah," Joseph said, helping his friend to his feet. "We did it." They limped back to where the Krozath warriors were regrouping. The aliens let out a triumphant cry at the sight of their return. Grokath approached, his scales singed but his eyes shining with fierce pride. "A great victory," he said, "but the war is nowhere near the end." Joseph nodded, his expression hardening. "The Zorgons won't stop. We need to take the fight to them, to their homeworld." Theros clasped Joseph's shoulder. "It won't be easy." "No," Joseph agreed, "but we have no choice. We end this, once and for all." As the ragtag group of warriors began to plan their next move, Joseph felt the weight of the Nexus. Its power thrummed within him, a constant reminder of the responsibility he carried. The future of the cosmos hung in the balance, and he knew the true test was yet to come. The acrid stench of ozone and burning metal filled the air as Joseph and Theros stood on the bridge of their battered command ship. Through the viewport, the shattered remnants of Zorgath drifted in the void, a grim testament to the battle's devastating conclusion. Joseph's eyes blazed with residual Nexus energy as he turned to face the assembled leaders of their ragtag coalition. Krozath warriors, their iridescent scales dulled by exhaustion, stood shoulder to shoulder with the few surviving Eliani. The weight of their losses hung heavy in the air. "We've dealt the Zorgons a crippling blow," Joseph said, his voice hoarse from shouting orders in the heat of battle. "But our work is not nearly finished." Theros nodded, his alien features etched with weariness. "The Galactic Council must answer for their role in this conflict. We need to understand why humanity was truly banished. A Krozath warrior stepped forward, his voice a low hiss. How can we trust the Council after all we've seen? They left us to face the Zorgon threat alone. Joseph held up a hand, feeling the Nexus pulse within him. We go to them not as supplicants but as equals. They will answer our questions, or face the consequences. The ship's communication array crackled to life. A nervous technician called out, "Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council chambers on Centauri Prime." The main view screen flickered, revealing the stern visage of High Counselor Gentak. The avian alien's feathers were ruffled, her eyes narrowed with barely concealed anger. "Joseph of Earth, you will cease your unauthorized military actions immediately," Gentak squawked. "The destruction of Zorgath is an act of self-defense," Joseph interrupted, stepping closer to the screen. "The Zorgons were building a weapon capable of destroying entire worlds. We had no choice." Theros moved to stand beside his human friend. "High Counselor, we come seeking answers. Why was humanity truly banished from galactic warfare? What role did the Nexus play in that decision?" Gentak's beak clacked in agitation. "You overstep your bounds. The Council's decisions are not subject to—" "They are now," Joseph said, his voice low and dangerous. He held up his hand, allowing tendrils of Nexus energy to dance between his fingers. "We're coming to Centauri Prime. Prepare for our arrival." The transmission cut off abruptly. Joseph turned to face his allies, willpower etched on his features. "Set course for Centauri Prime," he ordered. "It's time we learned the truth, regardless of the cost." As the ship's engines hummed to life, propelling them towards their next confrontation, Joseph felt the weight of the Nexus within him. Its power thrummed through his veins, a constant reminder of the responsibility he carried. The true test, he knew, was yet to come. The battered flagship limped through space, its hull scarred from the brutal battle on Zorgath. Joseph stood at the viewport, watching distant stars streak by as they sped toward Centauri Prime. The cost of victory greatly troubled on his mind. "How many?" he asked quietly. Theros approached, his alien features etched with exhaustion. "We lost over half the Krozath warriors. The Eliani, only a handful remain." Joseph's fists clenched. "We need answers, real ones this time." They made their way to the makeshift war room, where holographic displays flickered with data stolen from the Zorgan command hub. For hours, they pored over encrypted transmissions and ancient star charts. "Look at this," Theros said, enlarging an image. "These energy signatures, they're almost identical to your Nexus." Joseph leaned in, his eyes widening. "But this data is from thousands of years ago. How?" "Wait," Theros interrupted, bringing up another file. "These troop movements, the devastation, it wasn't the Zorgans." The truth hit them like a physical blow. Humans, their own ancestors, had wielded this terrible power once before. As they neared Centauri Prime, tension crackled through the ship. The Galactic Council's massive space station loomed before them, dripping with defensive weaponry. "Unidentified vessel, power down your engines and prepare to be boarded," a stern voice crackled over the comms. Joseph exchanged a glance with Theros. "Here we go." Armed guards swarmed onto their ship, roughly escorting them through gleaming corridors. They were brought before the full council, a diverse array of alien species seated in a grand amphitheater. High Counselor Gentak's avian features twisted with disdain. "You dare come before us after the destruction you've caused?" Joseph stepped forward. "We come seeking truth, about the Nexus, about humanity's banishment." He activated a holo projector, displaying the damning evidence they'd uncovered. Gasps and angry mutters rippled through the chamber. "Lies!" a reptilian counselor hissed. "Human propaganda!" Theros' voice cut through the din. "This data came directly from Zorgon archives. You've hidden the truth for millennia." The accusations flew back and forth. Joseph's frustration mounted as the council deflected and obfuscated. Suddenly, an ancient Eliani counselor rose shakily to his feet. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying surprising strength. "It is time Silence fell as the elder spoke, revealing the horrifying truth about the cosmic nexus and humanity's dark past. Joseph felt the blood drain from his face as the full weight of history settled upon him. "We must end this cycle," Joseph said firmly. "The nexus, it needs to be contained. Forever." Deep within the council's most secure vault, Joseph and Theros stood before an intricately carved containment device. Joseph held out his hand, feeling the familiar surge of power for the last time. The nexus pulsed, almost reluctant to leave him. With a deep breath, Joseph released it. Brilliant energy flowed into the device, pulsing once before going dark. As they sealed the vault, Joseph felt a profound sense of loss and relief. The corrupting influence that had haunted humanity for so long was finally contained. In the council chambers, the mood had shifted. The ban on human participation in galactic affairs was officially lifted. Joseph and Theros found themselves surrounded by allies, old and new, all eager to forge a better future. As they prepared to depart, Joseph caught Theros' eye. The alien smiled, a rare sight that spoke volumes. Their journey had reshaped the very fabric of galactic society. The void of space stretched before them as Joseph and Theros stood on the observation deck of their ship. Stars twinkled in the distance, a stark contrast to the somber mood that hung between them. Joseph broke the silence. "So this is it then? The end of our journey together?" Theros turned to face his human companion. His alien features softened with an emotion Joseph had learned to recognize as affection. "It doesn't have to be." "What do you mean?" Theros gestured towards the viewport. "Come with me to Eliani. Help us rebuild. Be the bridge between our peoples that you were always meant to be." Joseph's breath caught in his throat. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, nearly as heavy as the responsibility he'd carried with the Nexus. He closed his eyes, memories of Earth flashing through his mind. When he opened them again, determination burned in his gaze. "I'll do it." Years passed in a blur of reconstruction and diplomacy. Joseph threw himself into the work, learning the intricacies of Eliani culture, even as he helped shape new alliances across the galaxy. Theros remained by his side, a constant friend and ally. But not all welcomed this new era of cooperation. "Another riot on Centauri Prime," Theros reported, his voice tight with frustration. "Zarkoth's followers grow bolder by the day." Joseph frowned, studying the holographic display of protest footage. Angry faces of various alien species shouted slogans against human involvement. "We need to do more to address their concerns." "Their concerns are based on lies and fear-mongering," Theros countered. Before Joseph could respond, a priority communication from the Galactic Council flashed on the screen. High Counselor Gentok's avian features filled the display. "Joseph, Theros," she said, her tone grave, "we have a delicate mission for you, one that could make or break this fragile peace we've built." Joseph leaned forward, his interest piqued. "We're listening." "Infiltrate Zarkoth's inner circle, discover his true motives. Only then can we hope to counter his influence." Joseph exchanged a glance with Theros. The alien's expression mirrored his own mix of persistence and apprehension. "It'll be dangerous," Theros said softly. Joseph nodded, "but necessary." Weeks later, they found themselves in the heart of Zarkoth's stronghold. Joseph's skin crawled as he listened to the hateful rhetoric spewed by the movement's leader, forcing himself to nod along as if in agreement. "The humans cannot be trusted," Zarkoth thundered to his assembled followers. "Their past actions prove their inherent corruption." As the crowd roared its approval, Joseph caught a glimpse of something clutched in Zarkoth's hand. His blood ran cold as he recognized the telltale glow of a Nexus shard. "Theros," he whispered urgently, "we have a problem." The battle that followed was brutal and swift. Joseph and Theros fought side by side, their movements perfectly in sync after years of partnership. But Zarkoth wielded the power of the Nexus shard with terrifying skill. Energy crackled through the air as Joseph found himself face to face with Zarkoth. The alien leader's eyes glowed with malevolent power as he raised the shard. You see, Zarkoth snarled, this is the legacy of humanity, destruction and chaos. Joseph didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grappling with Zarkoth for control of the shard. Pain lanced through his body as the Nexus energy surged between them. With a final desperate effort, Joseph wrenched the shard from Zarkoth's grasp. But he knew, deep in his bones, that there was only one way to end this. I'm sorry, Theros, he whispered. Joseph pressed the shard to his chest, feeling its power surge into him. The world around him exploded in light and agony as he channeled the Nexus energy outward, decimating Zarkoth and his forces. When the light faded, Joseph lay broken on the ground. Theros cradled him gently, tears in his alien eyes. Hold on, my friend, Theros pleaded. We'll get you help. Joseph managed a weak smile. No time. Promise me. Promise you'll guide humanity. Help them find their place. Theros clasped Joseph's hand tightly. I swear it. With a final shuddering breath, Joseph closed his eyes. The Nexus energy that had sustained him faded away, leaving behind a legacy that would shape the galaxy for generations to come.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.